Hello, welcome to Last Call. This is a place for answers, not all the answers. Are you surprised? Again, um, seriously, some answers. I'm going to be summarizing the first video, and I want to give credit to Gil Broussard and to Steve Olson over at WSO. Appreciate their diligence. Go over and check their channels. They're doing an amazing job showing the peripheral scientific data and how that data corroborates the prophetic element. Now, the clip that I have up now is it actually shows the spectrum, the radiation coming from the sun and its focal point. It's obviously, if you notice, on the Yucatan, on the peninsula there, southern Mexico is where that I think it was an 8.3, 8.5, it was a big boy. And that's where it hit. And of course, the data shows everywhere. There's data that shows that there's a link, and it's become pretty much an accepted knowledge that there's a link between the coronal holes, the solar winds, the charged particles coming at us, the electromagnetic influences of these things, and the heating of our core. Best place for data that I have found for the sun is Ben Davidson over at Suspicious Observers. Check him out. And NASA and some of the powers that be are keeping the hammer down on this. You can go and, well, here's a report from them. Let me put that up. And it's pretty typical. I mean, there's nearly 3 million amateur astronomers and professional astronomers that know that NASA and the powers that be have been obfuscating and holding back information from the public and the scientific community for years. But I digress, and the map you're looking at now shows the actual problem areas as the solar streams have come at us with charged particles that I just mentioned that are coming with the solar streams, the solar winds from the coronal holes, as we saw dramatically demonstrated in the CMEs. The energy coming from the sun is heating up our core. And the reason is the magnetosphere, which is our natural shield, which is such a God thing. I mean, it's amazing how we would already have been fried many times over without it. The magnetosphere cannot filter out everything that's coming at us, and a lot of it's coming at us at, 7 to 900 million miles a second, literally. And so these particles go to our core, they heat up the core, they heat up, therefore, the magma, and the heat pressure, as you know, has to go somewhere. And so we've had this radical exponential increase in earthquakes and volcanism. Volcanoes long dormant for centuries, millennia, are going off all over the planet. The graphic that you have up now, this map, shows where that last series of quakes went. We all went off, I should say. We often have the ring of fire going there. You see it all the time, daily. You see the ring of fire going off, and that's what you're looking at. The turquoise or blue circle there on the Yucatan, of course, is that 8.3 or 8.5, whatever it was, that I had mentioned earlier, which is a direct result of the CME that, the really huge CME that we recently had. Now, the Bible actually talks about this. Those coronal holes are part of a prophecy. It says that quite plainly in several places in Scripture that the sun will go dark and be darkened, and one place it says it'll be turned black as sackcloth, which is an ancient way of saying it. But for example, in Acts 2:19, it says, "I will show wonders in the heavens and above, and signs on the earth below, blood, fire, and billows of smoke." And the sun will be turned to darkness and the moon into blood before the great and notable day of the Lord will come. And of course, the map that you have up right now speaks of the diverse earthquakes in the prophecy. And one of those is Matthew 24:7. It says, "Nation shall rise against nation, and there will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places." For anyone that's really studied the sciences and biblical prophecy and just biblical accounts in general in relation to archaeology and the sciences in general, you realize quite early actually that they corroborate each other redundantly. And the graph you're looking at now is another example of that. Exponential increase as we come down to the wire here. On the college level, I should say, on the college graph, that is the bottom of the two, it's off the charts. And I think some of the other, like government, you see it quite often in the reports that go out into the public from the government installations, the government institutions, NASA, and all the government-sponsored equipment, satellite readouts, and monitor services. They'll play things back because they don't want people to panic and as to what's about to hit our crazy little planet here. So there's obviously a exponential increase in the seismic and volcanism issues. Also, of course, when you have that kind of pressure, the plates will shift, and that's also one of the main reasons, of course, we're getting the seismic activity. Now, what you're looking at here is what's called cactus, and I'll go into that in just a minute. There's so many, as I keep saying, there's so much out there, so many ways to investigate all this and to validate what I'm saying here and what many others are saying. There's a lot of conjecture out there and stuff, but this is real data you're looking at. This is the real deal. Now, the reason I've leaned so heavily on showing that the energy coming from the sun is the main influence in what's causing all this is because it's so obvious. You're seeing now, the general public is seeing far more of this kind of thing just through the news reports. It doesn't take a genius to start to put this together. But again, the status quo in the scientific community, you can lose your funding if you stand up against the status quo, right? So they got that button down pretty tight. But now, all that to say, the other influences, I'll show you the magnetosphere in a moment here, and you'll see the result of the pressure coming from behind. So we have this system that's come in. We are binary, and the other star in our binary system is a failed star. It's as I said in the first video, a brown dwarf. Brown dwarf and its moons have come in. It's also carrying several million miles of iron oxide debris behind it, including meteors, small and large, and asteroids. And so now, as a little bit of humor in the middle of all of this, of these statistics, one of the enigmas in astronomy is, why do people not call hemorrhoids asteroids? Sorry, I had to throw that in there. But all corn aside, the brown dwarf has come in, and its magnetic influences, the electromagnetic influences, are coming from behind us now. We are getting pounded from several directions, and I'm going to do another video after this that shows the actual shadows and electron and proton and ion signatures of this thing, which are proof. I mean, it's got, people are somewhat inoculated. They see so much information these days that they'll look right at the evidence and go, wow, that's interesting, and go to the next thing, not realizing that all the questions just got answered. You're looking at the answer. You're looking at the evidence when you see these things, like the cactus. In fact, let me go ahead and bring that back up here. Now, along with that, what you're looking at right now, you'll probably have to zoom this one, is what's called Cactus. It is says right there, it's a software package for the computer-aided CME tracking. And these units use either electrons. They have different filters, electrons. I believe this is a proton, shows the flux in the protons. So the energy you're seeing is coming off of the sun. So you're seeing emissions of energy because of those particular charged particles and or others. I'm not that astute when it comes to these filters and the different. There's a huge amount of resources out there to be looking at. And this is one of them. Cactus is very good. It shows the emissions. It shows it can show other things coming into our solar system. They can be observed on this graph, and it's basically star field behind you, behind the graph, and those emissions coming off of the right of the circle that says cactus, the cactus being the sun. They got their logo there, shining brightly. Those emissions are that great CME we just had that still affecting the planet and in many different ways. I'll try and find those sources that I put up in the first video and get them up here so you can screenshot those and do your own homework. This graph that you're looking at right now, it's really a composite, satellite composite is what it is. That is, of course, our magnetosphere, for those that are not familiar. The magnetosphere is our shield from the sun, as I shared in the last video. It's a really miraculous thing. It's a God thing. There's so many details in it. Now, this particular picture of is telling us that our magnetosphere is under perhaps an unprecedented attack. Well, it is an unprecedented attack from the sun. And as you will see later, it gets even worse. The color on the front end, what's called the bow shock, that half circle around the front of everything, is red. And if you look at the graph at the bottom right, that's the extreme of pressure energy, solar energy coming from the sun. So we're getting pounded. Now, what's really unprecedented is that we have that color behind us. I've never seen anything like it. And people I know are baffled. People that have been at this their whole lives are baffled completely by what we're looking at here. For those who don't know, I'll summarize real quick. That little dot in the middle of the black dot is the Earth. The dark side of that little dot is the dark side of the Earth. Obviously, the light side is the sunlit side. Now, what this composite graph shows us is that something is coming from behind. We have pressure, gravitational, but mostly electromagnetic pressure coming from behind us. Normally, of course, everything comes from the sun and goes by us. Now, on this particular composite, as I was saying, the field lines, both the B lines and the IMF lines, are at least going in the right direction off to the left there. And that's some semblance of normalcy, but the color is unprecedented. We shouldn't have that color. That speaks of extreme energy being drawn off of us and attacking us from the rear, if you will, as well. Coming to, well, let me show you how radical it has gotten lately. This particular composite, same thing, magnetosphere, shows the destruction, really. In many ways, looks like the destruction of our magnetosphere. That's how bad things have gotten. If that happens, it lines up a lot of other prophecies we can talk about later. Before I go any further, I want to give credit where it is due. You've heard me tout Gil Broussard. Steve Olson, I should plug him again. Steve Olson at WSO, the channel WSO. He gets a lot of visual data from around the world and really handles it well, and knows how to do the photo forensics to make sure that what he's looking at is authentic. It hadn't been photoshopped and stuff. Really, really good. A lot of good data. And I want to give credit to him because a lot of times I'll just do a screenshot when I'm gleaning from other channels. It's not that I'm a plagiarist. It's just that when you're in the research community, everybody draws from each other. And we should be working together across the board, really, and not competing or anything, because this thing's coming down and it's not going to be pretty, to put it mildly. So really what you're looking at here, I just wanted to give Steve credit. Go check out WSO. And I don't want you to think I'm, like I said, a plagiarist. This is all public access, these graphs and these composites and satellite pictures. There's a huge amount of resources out there that you can look at, as I mentioned. Now, basically what you're looking at on this composite is the destruction of our magnetosphere. I mean, there's every reason to believe that our magnetosphere is being destroyed. Now, the importance of that cannot be overstated, and I don't mean to fear porn or anything like that. This is not some fear-mongering. This is just straight up data. This is where we are, folks, and I can't apologize for it. It's just that time in the world's history, and it lines up perfectly with the prophetic events that are happening in all directions, in all countries, in all categories right now. Just look at the news. Now, if it weren't enough that we are having to deal with the, demise of our magnetosphere or partial destruction or whatever it ends up being, simultaneously we have so many other things coming at us. But the two main problems, as I shared in the first video, are the obvious solar emissions, CMEs, and charged particles from the coronal holes on the solar streams, solar winds. But we also have this newfound electromagnetic pressure and drawing and from this binary system that has come in. Now, an example of the other reasons why the weather and the many anomalies in several different categories catastrophically are taking place is because the earth has begun to wobble. Now, this too is in line with the scriptures, in line with the prophecies. One of those says that the earth will shake like a hut in the wind and will wobble like a drunkard. And many people have claimed that they, even serious researchers have noted that the moon seems to be moving around and changing its axis and flipping around and moving by degrees. And the truth is, what's happening is we are moving, and we're rotating on our axis in an oblong pattern. We're wobbling, basically, just like the prophecy said we would. Now, that's not to say that the moon is not being perturbed, what they call perturbed. A perturbance is the astronomical word for when there is an electromagnetic or gravitational influence on another body. In fact, that's how they discovered the brown dwarf, known as PX or P7X or Nibiru. It's got so many names on that thing, but the bottom line is they found that when the outer planets were being moved around and perturbed, that's when they sent out the probes. And like I forget, I think the Voyager and the other probes that they went out to find this thing. And of course, they weren't telling the public what they were up to. And they sent out three. They sent one south of the universe, which does not mean south by the compass, and then two in another direction. And they knew that if any of them began to speed up, then they were being drawn, and that would be the direction in which this perturbing body could be found. And for those that are not familiar with the astronomical terminology, body means, of course, object, planet, asteroid, moon, something. In this case, something very large, and because it was perturbing the outer planets. Now, it was discovered, actually undercover, of course, and they said that it would take about 16 years for it to come in and this is exactly 16 years later. This little mini solar system has come in. And as it has been approaching, it's been affecting our solar system in profound ways, and we're now seeing a zenith in the weather anomalies and destruction and all the things that were prophesied. It is, as you're seeing in this statement, it's obvious that we're further down the road and everything is much more exponential in its effects than it was back in 2004, as stated here. And not only the solar obvious influences it has on our solar surface, the surface of the sun, and the way the sun is acting. I mean, we've got a lot of different things happening with our sun that I can't go into here. But the planetary effects here at terra firma, of course, are the issue. Even our Inuit friends, that is what some know as the Eskimos, the Inuit tribes in Alaska, they're so in touch with the stars and the moon and the sun, and they have to navigate by the stars in the old school way that most mariners did for centuries, millennia. And they have noticed, as this statement brings to light, that they are very aware that the sun is out of position, we are out of position, and the earth is wobbling, and the Inuit elders got in touch with NASA again and again, and finally they sent somebody up there to interview them because they were using grids, natural grids. They have what's called tongues, which are ridges in the ice, as their landmarkers, and the drifts have changed. Everything's changed and shifted. They've had to go sideways to literally on all their linear landmarks, and then at night, of course, the constellations are out of position because we're out of position. And when you're navigating in a polar ice, your life depends on the accuracy of those readings. So anyway, you get the point. And the latest readings that I have found is given on this particular graphic here. We have in fact shifted by at least 8 degrees, and since we're wobbling, that's going to vary as well. And as I said before, this all lines up with prophecy. These events are all in the prophetic pronouncements, and as I suggested, if you go to Gil Broussard's channel there at planet7x.net, you can begin to see just how analytically and redundantly these correlations and corroborations line up. It's really astonishing. He shows unambiguously and again repeatedly that this binary system has come in. You could call it our evil twin if you want, because it's draining our sun and pretty much draining us and throwing us around like a rag doll here lately. That's why everything, like we've been talking about, the anomalies are replete. They're everywhere. Now, the picture that you have up now is a proton, I believe, proton photograph or satellite composite of the CME we recently had, the big one, that facilitated that 8-point, whatever it was, earthquake there on the Yucatan Peninsula, southern Mexico. And this satellite composite picture is a proton filter, I believe. What you're looking at here is the CME. That type of energy actually illuminates a body, a planetary body, a huge planetary body off to the right there. You see that circular orb on the far right of the frame. And like I said, we've said, many are saying and know, without a doubt, NASA and the powers that be have obfuscated and not told people what we're looking at. And what they've said for years is, oh, that's just a sun flare. You know, they said it about everything. And it's absolutely asinine, because this is not this is not even a visual of light. This is the energy is being measured in photons and electrons, and so, I mean, they have different filters, as I was saying before. So you can't call something a sun flare, and the average person is, you know, when it comes to this stuff, as dumb as a box of rocks. It's sad because nobody ever does any homework. So they can just lie, and, you know, anybody that calls them on it, you know, they just call them fringe or accuse you of wearing a tinfoil hat, you know. Those lines that you see the small white and dark dot between the two objects, between the CME and the object to the far right. Those lines that come up to those orbs are what's called Birkeland currents, and those lines that, you know, wherever there's an object, that is a signature that lets you know that there's actually an object there. And the size of the Birkeland current is usually commensurate to the size of the object in question. That's why the small orb there in between the CME and the object to the far right has a small line, and the big object in question to the far right has a huge Birkeland current. So there it is. You're looking at the perturber, the problem child, and that's causing all this. It's part of the prophecy. All this stuff, he said he would do signs in the heavens and on the earth below, and so they are for signs, and that Genesis says that directly, verbatim. And of course, you have those types of statements all through Scripture. Here in Luke 21, 25 through 28, you know, it pretty much speaks for itself. And there will be signs in the sun and in the moon and upon the earth, and distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the men's hearts failing them for fear, and for seeing those things which are coming upon the earth. For the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then they shall see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when you see these things come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Well, I've gone long on this video, and just gee whiz information. I am by trade, professionally I'm a recording artist, and A lot of this kind of stuff comes out in my music. It's the universal language, of course. And, I have people that have followed my friends and stuff and followed what I do for years, and they, quite often I've had people, close friends, say, just shut up and sing, Rick. So I've flailed at this. I'm not oratory or scientific, really. Just done a lot of homework and don't claim to know a lot. I mean, like Einstein said, the more I learn, the more I know there is a God. And that's really, but, again, music is the universal language, and if you want to hear it the way I like to say it, just go over to ricknorrismusic.net, not .com. And ricknorrismusic.net, and check the site out. And I've got a series of new singles out right now that are I wouldn't know how to describe them. Some say Stevie Ray, Hendrix, Cornell, with an R&B vocal. So it's just a gift. I mean, everybody has their thing, and we walk around the planet pushing our chests out and acting like we have something intrinsically in ourselves, but we don't have anything we haven't received. And put us out on the savannah, we're at the bottom of the food chain. So we're not all that, and neither am I, so don't get the wrong impression. Yeah, I just work here. Anyway, I can't encourage you enough to just get in God's face and talk to Him. He likes it. More to come, and for now, thanks, and I'll have more for you soon.